Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zebra Talk, the podcast where we shine a little light onto the lives and the untold stories of the people who slide on their knees and count the threes. That's right, I'm talking about the referees. I'm your host, Referee Odie Brown, and I'm joined today by one of my absolute best friends in the whole world, one of my favorite people in the wrestling business. You know her, she needs no introduction, but I'll do my best to give her one anyway. We're joined by the just groundbreaking referee Aubrey Edwards from All Elite Wrestling. Hello, how are you?
Hello, hi. First off, thank you for all those nice things. Two, I love your little intro spiel and how nicely it rhymed. Like, I don't know if that was intentional, but it's so solid. I'm like, oh man, I am totally like in the right mindset to do this now.
It was 100% intentional. It took me a little while to write it, and you enjoyed it this time just as much as you did last time we recorded this, which I have totally thrown myself under the bus multiple times in the interviews that I 100% have interviews from about 2 years ago that never got released.
Yes, that's right. That was such a crazy day. I totally forgot.
We were at PWG Bola, and you were putting your war paint on, and it was a very.
I was gonna say, is the war paint gonna come up in this one? I think we're in a basement, and I'm putting concealer on my face.
Right. I should have mentioned in your introduction the originator of the show day nails, which I'm feeling a little bit of a love today.
Yeah. I do not have my nails painted. I typically don't paint them outside of show day because my nails are absolute like terrible and brittle, and nail polish breaks them. So it's what we do for our art.
In reverse, I typically don't paint my nails for show days. So
I like it. You're rocking it. I didn't get the memo. Sorry, I would have participated.
Gosh, why didn't you know? No, actually,
I'm sorry.
My girlfriend was just like absentmindedly doing hers the other day, and she was like, "You want me to do yours?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not? I haven't had them in a while."
That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, right. I see a Kitty. Hi, Kitty.
Yeah.
Mine's over here.
She will vanish
sleeping.
Very quickly. Yeah, my cats don't like being on camera. They're the kind of cats where if I pull out my phone to take a picture, they immediately change position.
Same.
Because, yeah, it's real fun. It's like all the things that people like about having cats. You can take pictures of them and they sit on your laps and they love cuddling. Like my cats don't like any of that.
And they're just like, you know what? I'm just going to exist and allow you to survive around me because you feed me.
Yes, I'm going to yell at you until you feed me.
So let's dive into it. Obviously, we've done this conversation a few times. Unfortunately, the rest of the people haven't heard it, but we're gonna do our best to like recreate a little bit of the magic. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what pertinent information you feel the people should know that maybe they haven't heard yet. How'd you find your way into wrestling? How'd you find your way into the stripes? A little bit of early life. Go ahead, dive in.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short. I've told this story a little bit in previous interviews and whatnot, but kind of the weird one. A lot of people, kind of the weird one. A lot of people who are into wrestling have been watching it their entire lives, and I started watching it when I was, I don't know, like early 20s. Sure. It's kind of one of those like people joke about why celebrities show up in the ring at wrestling shows, and it's purely to get like lapsed fans involved. Yeah. And I'm just like, haha, that's not true. And then I remember back to the reason I watched WrestleMania 27, right, was because The Rock came back to co-host. I'm like, I love The Rock. I watch all his movies. I have his quote tattooed on my body. Like I was this huge fan, like only knew him as a movie star and not as a wrestling star. So I was like, okay, cool, let's do this. I don't know anything at all about wrestling, not the slightest thing. But got super into it. You and I are both theater nerds, so right. I think we both kind of feel this one very similarly. But once you realize that wrestling is just another form of storytelling, all of a sudden it completely opens it as this new media and this new performance art. So that was the thing that really drew me in, that it's like you have these people and these personalities. You don't know how much is a character and how much is the actual person. And then they're portraying stories with their bodies, and you can see the physical pain they're going through. And I'm like, I was a dancer for a long time. I know exactly how that feels.
Not to mention like the interspersing of, like music and costumes and things like that, like long form storytelling. Like, yeah.
The pageantry of it all. Like I find myself watching wrestling and just like, it's the same thing we say, like, if people aren't intrigued by your entrance, they're just immediately like not interested in you as a character type thing. And that's always the thing that I'm like, oh man, I love their entrance. I love good entrance jackets. I love good entrance music. I love good poses. I love all the little details and nuances. And I think wrestling kind of leads itself nicely to that.
It really bums me out lately that like I'd say by and large like wrestling entrances have kind of taken a little bit of a snooze in the last like 10 years, whereas like if you watched, you know, like during The Rock's time, like you were mentioning, like they were very specific, you know, everybody had a specific hand gesture, a quote, a stance, some kind of like particular like movement when they came in. You see a lot of people just kind of like coming out and hey, I'm cool. Look, I work out. I really enjoy that you mentioned that, you know, you were like one of those fans that was just kind of the like, not even a casual viewer. You were just there to see a celebrity that was there, because I think folks like, you know, myself and others that like watch so diehard and regularly and are such like almost borderline obsessive fans, you know, we kind of like lose sight of the fact that like something like that can have a really positive effect, because I mean, obviously, that led to you having a large effect on the professional wrestling world. So like, there's something to be said for that happening, you know?
But go ahead and continue. You never really know when that's going to happen, right? But yeah, it literally, like from a wrestling perspective, now that I'm like on the inside, I see why we do something like that. Like we have celebrities on our show because they bring in different audiences, and ultimately we all want to make more money, and the more people watching wrestling, the better off everyone is. But at the same time, like the more people who could potentially be interested in wrestling and just maybe won't give it the time of day until they actually watch it. Like there's so many more potential for fans. And I think if people get past like the stigma of, oh, it's just fake, and actually watch it, like people will enjoy it. I know, for instance, like my family was not into wrestling at all until I got into the business, and now they obviously watch Dynamite every week. But then they were watching a bunch of indie shows whenever I was doing the local indie stuff. Anyway, back to the original thing. So I was watching WrestleMania 27, super cool, awesome, interested, started watching Raw and SmackDown, all that stuff, started traveling to wrestling, discovered indie wrestling. Suddenly the world opens up and there's all of these other things. And it's like, wait, you mean Daniel Bryan was Bryan Danielson? What is going on here? And you
what's
like
an American dragon?
What is this thing going on? CM Punk existed before WWE? Oh my God. Like all of these things. So it was like, oh wow, there's all this other content that I can watch. And then you learn about different products all having different presentations and stuff. And kind of going back to that different form of media thing, it's like different directors have a different way of doing movies. Different producers have a different like hand in things. So different companies
designers will make a different. Yeah, exactly. The ring is going to look different. The entrance is going to look different. Yeah.
Well, and even then, like you have wrestlers show up at different promotions on the indies, and they maybe have like their heel here, their baby face here, or they have a more elaborate entrance here. They've got different music. Like there's all these different things. So you're almost, as a fan, you gain a lot just out of the investment of following these specific talent from place to place.
Right.
So all of that being said, and all of the appreciation I have for the art, I never really had any interest in joining the business per se. I was pretty content with being a fan. As you know me, I am always constantly busy. I'm always filling my time with things to do.
What do you load a lot of things onto your plate or something?
Yeah, totally. I think the technical term is workaholic. I think I've started like fully admitting that I'm a workaholic, and then like coming to terms with that and all that. So before I was a referee, I was a full-time game developer, which eventually came back full circle. I'm sure we'll get into that. And then my hobby was I was a classical ballerina for about 20 years. So my plate was already full, to go back to that metaphor. And I was more than content with everything that I was doing. Again, I was in my 20s dancing. I still had a number of years. I hadn't completely fallen apart yet. But my husband was the one that basically, as soon as we discovered a local Seattle indie show, he's like, I need to start doing this. Yeah. He's like, I think his exact words were like, they announced like, we're starting classes. And he turns to me and says, I'm going to do this or I'm going to regret it. And I said, do you, bro? Like, I'll support you, whatever you need to do. And it was cool and neat and awesome. And I just liked being a supportive wife because I had all these other things to do. Sure. But eventually it was 2017, early 2017. Some things were happening in my dance life that kind of made me question how long I was going to stay in it. Both the physical and the emotional toll was starting to kind of impact a lot more negatively than it was positively. So I had kind of some hard decisions to make. And after I did this big show in April with a local nonprofit, I was like, you know what, I got to stop. Like, I need to step away. I don't know if I'm going to come back to it, but I definitely need a break. And then it was immediately hit a wall, plummet. Welcome, hello, depression. This is great. So I immediately needed something new to fill that time. Because again, back to being a theater nerd, there's that rush that comes with performing.
Right.
And
there's nothing like being in front of a live crowd, and
exactly. You get that rush. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug, right? And being able to have that outlet for creativity and have that outlet for self-expression, that was suddenly gone. So I needed something new to fill it. And it was right around that time that Chris Samuels, who was one of my trainers, reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for more referees at our local promotion. I trained at this place called 321 Battle. They're unfortunately no longer around. But they were looking for more refs. I think they only had 2 at the time. And they're like, you should try it out. I'm like, okay.
Why would I do that?
I don't know why you would think I would want to do that. I think were my exact words. And he's like, well, you have the whole dance background and stuff. And little did I know how much crossover there would be later.
Sure.
But yeah, I tried out. I was terrible. Definitely one of those
when
like
they first try.
Right. It's like you think you know everything about reffing, and then as soon as you stand behind some wrestlers, you're like, oh God, I'm going to get trampled. Like, what am I doing? I suddenly forgot all of the rules, what's happening. And I'm sitting in my car after crying, like, this is terrible. Why did I do this? And it was awful. But I've always been kind of a person that like, you can't develop an opinion off of just one experience.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool, great. I'm going to go and try again. And like, I'll attend a practice. We'll see how it works in like a non-audition setting. Like it was actual, like go to practice, go train. The wrestlers are taking bumps. We're doing drills, all that kind of stuff. And the second time was a lot better than the first. I didn't go out to my car and start crying immediately after practice. So bonus, positive.
Yay, happy experiences.
Yeah.
It's crazy how wrestling will like find you and just grab a hold of you and will like not let you go, like no matter what your experiences are, no matter how like you may have a negative or toxic night or interaction with other people, like wrestling just has more than theater even really was for me. It has a way of just like grabbing you and not letting you go.
Right. And I think part of that too, like dance, you always had the one company. So you're always dancing with the same people. Mm-hmm. And I think with the way that wrestling is set up, where you have specific companies and then you have your wrestlers jumping from company to company, like it's that constant surge of, oh, hey, I get to hang out with my friend today. I didn't see my friend for like 2 months. Yeah. And it's,
or like
it's
if you get really sick of like one environment, it's like you're immediately going to be thrust into another one. It's very vaudevillian, like you take your act on the road and you go, do your thing.
It's vaudevillian, but at the same time, it's completely different every time you do it. Like you could have a match as a ref with 2 people at one place, and then it's a completely different match elsewhere because for whatever reason, the crowd's different. They're serving beer, whereas they weren't at the other place. The booker's different. There's an existing storyline, like whatever the reason may be.
One of the boys woke up late, so they're tired, like, whatever. Like, there's so many variables.
One guy's hurt and they're working around his shoulder. Like that's always the go-to one. It's like, I'm not feeling good. Let's just do like a silly match because I don't actually want to take bumps today. But yeah, it's like, I started training in May of 2017. Mm-hmm. I had my debut July 7th of 2017 and stayed primarily in Washington and Vancouver, British Columbia for the first year or so. And then 2018 started branching out, doing Oregon. I did a couple shows in California. I did WrestleMania that year, which was in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. I had a tryout for the Mae Young Classic, and then I had a tryout for NXT that year. And then in 2019, I started up with AEW. So my trajectory has just kind of been like an exponential curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, can we slow down?
I thought I was on a crazy curve. I thought Jeremy and I were on a crazy curve.
Yeah. And
which
then
like we are, but
like,
yeah,
hey.
like you're like just on a straight up incline. You're a tree. You're not a
Yeah. It's like, I'm just like, as soon as I got my roots, I just started shooting up. Like that's all it was. So the whole thing is still kind of like, in the grand scheme of things, it's been like non-existent. And I know I'm hoping like 20 years from now, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. That was like, a small period of time in this vast career I have. But right now it's just been so fast that I'm just kind of trying to enjoy it, I think, as best as possible. And understanding that like, this isn't the norm. Like I know people who have been like wrestlers, especially who've been on the indies for 10, 15, 20 years and haven't got their shot. And a lot of it just comes down to timing and preparedness. And
Sure.
a lot of what happened
Who
with
you run
me was
into.
completely, like I got in touch with AEW because Brian Cage had to pull out of a show and Frankie Kazarian filled in instead.
Right.
And it's just that one conversation that kind of spurred everything. But then part of that is like all of the work you do leading up to that point to get you to that spot where that conversation magically happens.
Not to
And
mention
that's
making
always,
sure everything that night when the conversation happens goes as well as possible. Yeah.
right. I ended up doing the like, oh yeah, we'll talk. And then waited until the match was done before I sent him everything, just in case it sucked. Like, it's like, I've already got the email typed up.
I don't want to just remind you of who I am if it's terrible.
Right. If it's terrible, I just want to apologize and like hang my head and like walk away while the sad Hulk walking away music plays, right? Like, yeah, no.
Well, it's nice to see that things have gone very well. Do you see yourself like doing this, like just indefinitely? Like, do you feel like you want to do this as like a lifelong career? Like, you had mentioned, like obviously you're in a very short time span right now, and you said hopefully a very lengthy career, but like, what do you see for yourself long term?
I mean, the hope is that I can do this as long as I physically can. I think the benefit of being a ref is you have more physical longevity than you do as a wrestler, because it's a different kind of impact on your body. Like, I'm not throwing my body on plywood, but then again, like my hips and my shoulders are getting used to a crazy extent. So long as I'm taking care of myself and our schedule isn't so crazy, there is a chance for good longevity. Like, I've been really lucky in that I haven't had any major injury yet. I kind of avoided one. I'm currently like dealing with a strained bicep and I went to the doctor today and they're like, yeah, you don't have a left rear deltoid. I'm like, yeah, no, I kind of need to like get better about lifting and not just work
jacked,
like,
bro.
No, I'm getting too jacked in the wrong places. That's what I learned. Like it's the, oh yeah, no, I should probably like do research about these kind of things and not just like try and get a high number for bench press. Like,
not just be like, let me get big biceps, bro. It'll be great.
I just got to benchmark a stunt. Like, that's my goal. And then, it turns out like if you don't work your back and your shoulders, that kind of screws you up a little bit. So
it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm actually like seeing a physical therapist right now because like I would stretch before my matches, but never, an adequate amount or appropriately or anything like that. And I wasn't really doing much weight training at the time. So now my shoulder is just screwed, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of, or like you're doing stretching, but not doing the right stretching, or you're overstretching, which is another fun one. Like, I was talking to Luchasaurus about that recently because he would stretch for like an hour before his match. And turns out he was like, I think he was overstretching, and then he ended up changing his routine and it ended up helping big time. So even if it's like, you don't know what you're doing is most beneficial for your body, because obviously it's not like a do this and then everything's great. And if someone had figured that out, we'd all look like supermodels right now, right? Like, but that obviously doesn't work. And then as we get older, our bodies change. So I'm not a spring chicken anymore, despite having a ton of energy. So kind of understanding that when, oh my God, I turned 34 in like 2 weeks. It's kind of crazy.
I didn't realize our birthdays were so close to each other. I'm 32 in about a month. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, it's super exciting. March is a good time for ref birthdays, apparently.
Right. But yeah, same thing. And like, not to mention all the like crazy variables of like all the travel schedule, like obviously our time in the ring can mess us up, but like, spending hours and hours on buses and airplanes and, in tiny cramped spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not lost on me that flying to Jacksonville every other week is probably like damaging my body to like an extent that I don't understand, but I've invested in a good lumbar pillow.
There you go.
I go to the chiropractor often. I do yoga every day. So, I mean, I do hope that this is a long career. I'm doing what I can to make that possible, but I think also, and just given the opportunities that AEW has afforded me so far, like I'm already doing stuff outside of the ring. Like I've got the podcast I'm hosting with Tony Schiavone, and then I've got the AEW game stuff that I'm working on. So kind of bringing my old career into my new career. So I know for a fact I'll be a part of this business for a long time, just because I'm starting to learn the different sides of it. I'm learning the marketing. I'm learning the broadcasting. I'm learning all of these different parts and kind of seeing how the major machine works.
Making yourself just as invaluable as possible, having as many different facets and assets that you can bring to the table.
It's job security, brother.
Right? Yeah. That was the first thing I did when I went to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I'm like, all right, what can I learn? What can I learn? What can I learn? What can I learn? I am not here to just be a ref.
Yeah, it's one of those when you happen to like not be at work one day and then suddenly everyone notices that things fall apart. Like that's how you know you got a good gig.
Yeah, right.
not that I'm saying that I keep everything like together and without me things fall apart, but that's the goal, right? That you want to be indispensable.
Sure.
Because ultimately it's like, I mean, you feel this too, like refs are often considered not the priority, and
Right.
really they aren't, because
Almost
we're
an
not the ones on the
afterthought even.
poster.
Yeah.
Right. It's we're there to help elevate someone else's story.
Sure.
So the wrestlers are always the priority. So making sure that when you have your spot, you are that indispensable person. Like it's so critical to, I think, not only being a good referee, but just a good teammate. And in wrestling, it's all about being a part of the same product.
Mhm.
Like I think the old school mentality was very much like, well, I got to look out for my spot and I got to make sure that I'm doing my job. But ultimately,
Right.
it's like, I want all my friends to be successful. I want all my friends to have good matches. I want none of my friends to get injured.
Yeah.
Refs, wrestlers, announcers, like everybody. Like I want all of us to have a good time, and I want us to all make a lot of money. So yeah, like why would I wish anything less? I want us to all be indispensable.
It's great to have you giving different examples of things that, like, the different hats that refs can wear as well, because I think a lot of us, the only like extra job that people ever really think about is like ring crew or like driving the truck, like picking the boys up from the airport and things like that. And it's like, yes, that's going to be the bread and butter for a lot of people. And like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a very valuable tool and asset to the company. But like, there's a lot of other things that like you can bring to the table as a referee. You can use your education and your background and your other outside influences and things like that. So, what's that?
Oh man, yeah, my for the video version of the AEW game shirt. My long
Yeah,
hair is
we're both dropping a little like product placement here. Look up
a little
Steven
bit.
Tresario, look up AEW
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
Look up Squared Circle.
Hell yeah. Oh, definitely look those guys up. Those guys have been great. They took a chance on a ref that was a nobody.
But they saw potential, which has kind of been the overarching theme of like your whole career, is like people just understanding the potential that you were going to have. How did that make you feel, like as you were like literally just like kind of tossed into the deep end? You almost immediately have like all of these almost like iconic figures that like obviously you didn't grow up looking up to them or anything like that, but you're a pretty intelligent person. You understand the scope of like the people that are like seeking you out at this point. How did that make you feel?
It's been really interesting. Like my favorite example of all of this is Tony Schiavone, who
Mhm.
is the voice of most people's childhood when it comes to being
Sure.
wrestling fans. And for me, he was just a guy that I worked with. Like I didn't
Mhm.
fully understand, because a lot of what I had watched was more the WWE style stuff. I hadn't
Sure.
watched a lot of WCW. Um, so when he asked me to be on the podcast, I'm like, oh, that's cool, great. Guess they just want another girl or something. But like, turns out he like really liked my personality and thought I would we would feed off of each other well and type thing. And then turns out as I work with him more and more, and as I work with other people who have worked with him or grew up watching wrestling, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this guy's kind of a big deal.
Oh, so
Like,
like somebody really important like took a chance on me, and I should really
yeah,
understand how big that is.
yeah, I really should. And just like finding out these moments of like, oh yeah, no, that's a really big deal. And I think that's really the biggest part of it, is understanding like every moment that comes along. You don't, like, even though I have a job right now and I have a contract, like that could all be gone tomorrow.
Sure.
And I think it's important to always kind of have that mindset, whether or not
Yeah.
you're in wrestling or not, because I had that same mentality when I was working in games. Video games is a very volatile business.
You
Frequently,
finish a
if you work
game
at
and
a
you're done.
company, pretty much, like, funny enough, if you ship a game and it doesn't do well, you're probably getting laid off, because the company needs to be making money in for that game for the next few years in order to continue to pay their staff until the next game comes out.
Right.
So of the 4 companies I worked for, I had been laid off from 2. And that's pretty common. So kind of just knowing that it could all be all gone in an instant, I think is just generally a good mindset to have. So conversely to that, being appreciative of every moment that comes along or every opportunity, like knowing that, another good example. So for a long time, my favorite match was Cody versus Darby from the first Fighter Fest.
Sure.
Um, and part of that was because Darby and I are both from Seattle, and Seattle isn't really known as a wrestling place. So
Right.
ultimately, it's a very big moment for like Seattle wrestling and what that means for us getting to the highest level.
Which, like,
But
not to cut
also
you
what it
off, but I
means,
feel like you guys are doing a really good job of like shining a light on the Seattle wrestling scene.
we're
Like giving a
trying.
really good, yeah. You guys are providing a really good, like, crash course into what like the Pacific Northwest can bring to the wrestling table. So go ahead.
We're trying. I mean, I think everyone kind of fell into that same problem with COVID. It's like, okay, now it's slowed everyone down to a screeching halt, and hopefully we can find a momentum again when everything opens back up. But for a long time, Cody Darby was my favorite match because there were so many things and so many moments that needed to be talked about ahead of time that they were putting a lot of faith in me to do. And this is my second show with AEW. No one really knows who I am at that point. But Cody like specifically picked me for this match to give me the opportunity. And he didn't tell me this until like a year and a half later. But then talking with like the chair spot with Sean Spears afterwards, like we went over the timing for that like 30 times because it was Sean's debut into AEW. And
it was a huge pivotal moment. Yeah.
It was the thing that defined his character for a very, very long time and reintroduced him as a guy who wasn't, you know, his previous character, Ty Dillinger. So like all of these moments and seeing it all play out, it's not that like people don't have faith in you, it's that they're relying on you. And I think a lot of it kind of has to come down to mindset. Like there are a lot of really cool people and I have been very fortunate to have all these opportunities, but I'm just trying to like appreciate everything as it's coming. Because I want it to last as long as possible. And I like having all these fun stories that I can tell on podcasts.
I think it's really easy to lose sight of those things though. You know, it's really good to hear and important that, you know, like you're reminding yourself as you go along, like how influential each of these moments is, because like, obviously the case could be said for yourself, but like for referees in general, like we get kind of thrust into like higher profile moments way faster than we probably were like expecting or ever even thought possible, you know, as compared to like wrestlers who, like you said, you'll be on the indies for like 5, 10, 15 years, just like scratching for a shot. You know, a good referee obviously goes a very long way. So, you know, it's important for us to remind ourselves as we're checking off boxes and goals. You know, you've talked about like, you make a goal list and then it's over as quickly as you've made it. Like it's very it's important for us to keep heads small and understand what it is that we're doing and really appreciate it, because you know there's so many people out there that like won't really ever get to be a part of things like that.
I think it's also very important to surround yourself with a good support system. And I'm going to put you over here for a second. Odie is very good about reminding me when my head gets a little too big and I need to be brought back down to earth because I'm floating away.
No, that's not something that I do.
I don't know if it's something you do for other people, but you do it for me. And I'm very appreciative of it.
I actually do. I've always thought that was a really important thing to have, not just in professional wrestling, but in life. Like, I really appreciate people that will not compliment you for the sake of complimenting you. Obviously, like, getting a compliment is nice. Getting a pat on the back is nice. Being told that you're doing a good job is nice. But, like, you don't get better by being told that you're doing well. You get better by being told what it is that you can actually improve on. So we're talking about keeping ego small. We're talking about keeping heads small and about people who kind of bring us back to earth. Do you have other people that you look to for that? I appreciate the shout out, by the way. That's not something that like, I really like. It's not something I dislike talking about publicly, but it's not something that like I advertise. But like you had asked, yes, there are other people that like I try and reach out to from time to time and be like, hey, let's
it's not really something that you put under like the when you're filling out your Tinder profile or whatever and your pros, like, I will deflate your ego the moment it gets too big. Like, that's not something you really advertise to people, I guess. But it's something that you start to realize, I think, as you develop good relationships with people. And that's part of what wrestling is, right? Like I think you become better in your role when you work with the people you work with often, because then you know how to rely on each other. You know how to ask for things. You know how to be honest. You know, the feedback's going to matter more because the other person cares about it, that kind of thing. Other people in my life that pop my ego when it gets too big. My husband's really good about it. I think you kind of have to be to be a healthy marriage.
Yeah, right.
And then one of my original coaches, Steve West, was historically very, very good at this. He never said something was good for the sake of being good, like never giving compliments for the sake of compliments, so that when he did say something was really good, it mattered. And you knew that it was a big deal because Steve liked it. Like that was always really important to me. And I've noticed a lot of like my favorite dance teachers were always the same way. Like anytime someone said, that was great. And I'm like, no, that was not good. Like, like suddenly they're discredited. Like,
it's useless. I don't want someone to say,
you're really awesome. It's like, tell me why, like, tell me something to work off of. Like, I'm fortunate to be in the position I'm in, but like, I want to get better. Like, yeah, sure, it's great to have someone compliment you all the time, but like, what is that going to do? Help you sleep at night? That's not going to help you keep your job. Like, you should constantly be bettering yourself, not to the point where you're going crazy.
We've talked about it a lot here on the podcast, actually, where like, it's hugely influential to have other referees on hand when you're learning and when you're, like getting reps and things like that, because like, it's nice to hear from the boys like, oh, I didn't notice that you were I didn't notice you were in there. And that's a compliment. It's like, that's a compliment. I understand that. I appreciate it. But like, also like, that's not going to help. Like, compliments aren't going to make me any better. Right.
Right.
And if you're not paying any attention to me, I'm never going to have anybody that can tell me how to get any better or fix anything.
Well, and a lot of it too is like figuring out what people mean by what they say. Like the standard, like the best compliment you can get as a referee from a worker is, I didn't even notice you were there. And ultimately what that means is your ring positioning is good because you weren't in the way of their stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of times like I'll be working with I watch tape with a lot of the up and coming girls on the indies. Just to kind of like give back and help out. And the big thing that they get, the big thing that they get out of it is like, they'll get feedback saying you need to look more authoritative.
Right.
And the big thing I always tell people is it's not about getting in people's faces and yelling. It's about standing upright. It's about having your shoulders back. It's about looking confident, because if you look confident in the rules, you look like a figure of authority, which is kind of how the two play into each other. So it's taking the feedback and understanding like the meaning behind it and then finding a way to apply it. So, okay, cool. I need to show I have more confidence. Well, how's my posture? How's my footing? How's my positioning? What are my facials like? All of these things. So it's finding the people that are willing to break that down and tell you the things you need to get good at, but then they're also willing to follow up, right?
Right.
Like,
which is such valuable input to have from somebody, like obviously it comes from like a theatrical experience and from a dance experience and things like that. Like, those are the things that we bring in. It's people will tell you over and over and over again, you need to be more authoritative. You need to look like you're in charge. You need to whatever. But until somebody actually breaks it down and explains to you, like you're saying, like, own your space, find your light, have good posture. Everybody's just going to keep screaming in wrestlers' faces and, think that they need to like interject themselves in between things. And I think that's why it's really good to have somebody like yourself that's willing to like lend their time to other people to help influence. So, yeah.
Right. There was one that, so like I think a lot of my, I don't know, like my rise to visibility came from my spot with Jericho at the title match versus Hangman at All Out, where I have this moment where I'm literally yelling in his face and people are like, oh, she's the ref that yells at people. And it's like, no, I'm the ref that yells at Jericho. Because one of the things that like Tommy Dreamer was actually backstage, I think at one of our early shows, and I got in Pentagon's face and yelled at him. And I get to the back and Tommy's like, that's really cool and stuff, but you don't want that to be your gimmick. I'm like, well, why not? He goes, because if you're yelling at the wrestlers, the heat is going to be on you and not on the wrestler. And I'm like, oh, and it's just having someone, he's the best. Yeah. But like those little moments, right? Of someone just like looking out at you, realizing what's happening, giving you the feedback, and unsolicited feedback is the best kind because it means someone actually cares about you, right?
Sure.
Like,
one, especially coming from somebody that like you didn't expect it to come from at all. Like, let alone, you go asking it from them, but like you probably wouldn't in your wildest dreams imagine that you were going to get like a nugget of like amazing input from Tommy Dreamer.
No, not at all. But since then, I kind of approached it as, well, if a wrestler gets in my face, I'll just be like sassy and just like, okay, sure, yeah, back up. Sure. Whereas if it's Jericho, I'll yell at him because now we have that established character dynamic going.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the difference is it's finding the spots that work for you, but also making them work for what the wrestlers need. Because ultimately our job is to tell someone else's story. So the last thing I want is for the heat to go to like me when it's supposed to go to one of the wrestlers, right? Because then I'm robbing them of their moment.
Of course. How do you feel AEW differs from other places in the sense of like allowing the referees to actually be, not like focus stealing characters or anything like that, but like actually have identities and like a name even, you guys are actually mentioned on commentary. Speak on that.
I mean, going back to the whole ego thing, I like that my name gets mentioned on TV. I'm not going to lie and say that I don't. So
What do you like
already
people knowing who you are?
right. Like, well, the fact they show like my name on a lower third with my Twitter handle, like that's absolutely insane to me.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is to realize that this is a very new thing. Like referees back in the day, like people knew who Earl Hebner was, people knew who Tommy Young was because they were naming them and they had spots and all these things. And then wrestling kind of changed and referees kind of became more background character. And I think what we're doing is kind of bringing the old school back to the new school a little bit. So it's from a business perspective, it makes sense because you have someone who has a social media presence, who has a following. Like all of the refs we have came from the indies and they've worked different territories. So they have different followings and they come from different promotions. So why not bring those eyes onto the AEW product?
Absolutely.
On top of that, I think it gives it a more like an element of realness to it. Like if you watch like an MMA fight or something, like the referee involved with that, different refs enforce things a little differently. Like some guys are going to be quicker to enforce. Exactly. And I think like that's one of the things I really love about AEW is like there's small changes in how fast each of us count. So who is the ref for a match could actually impact the finish.
Yeah.
If you think about it that way. So it's like, oh, Aubrey's the ref for this match. Like she's really strict about this, or I'm really loose about more things kind of happening on the outside, for instance. So it's a lot of like, I want to see more of a finish of what's happening. And that's just kind of like the style in which I enforce the rules. And AEW has been very, very good about making sure that as long as we're sticking to the strict, like, okay, eventually as I start counting them out on the outside, like they're,
as long as you're like
all that kind of stuff.
Enforcing with, as we say, the referee's discretion.
Yes. Everything at the end of the day is the referee's discretion. When we were writing the rule book for AEW, that's literally the first thing at the top. Like everything is referee's discretion. Like,
do you guys actually have a physical rule book?
We do. I mentioned that like a long time ago, I think on Jericho's podcast, that was one of the things that I first started doing when I got my office contract. I was waiting for things to do while we were signing games.
And I was like, actually establishing a set of rules that everybody can follow universally. What? Making sure everybody's on the same page. What?
Well, there's a lot of like, you're a new organization and we all generally know like what the rules are, but every promotion's a little different. And like our big thing that we established out of the gate was that our tag team double moves are 10 count instead of 5 count, which is the standard. But you know, what happens in this instance and what happens in this instance? And it's not just a tool for refs having, you know, an idea of what they need to enforce, but it's a tool for commentary so that they can explain what's happening in the match to the people at home.
Yeah.
It's a tool for the wrestlers so that they know how to use the rules to tell the story that they wish to tell.
Especially if there's some kind of, like you're saying, discretion between like how they've done things at other places and how they're going to be doing things at AEW now.
Correct. Yeah. And it's like, and as things have changed and we've sort of grown as a company, we've tweaked things here and there, or, you know, whatever it may be, like rules are always kind of growing and changing. Like the same thing happened with WWE. They've had stuff that they used to enforce that they don't enforce now. Like, I think the classic one is guys climbing up the top turnbuckle.
Yeah. The 5 corner. Count. Yeah.
Right. It's like that's not really traditionally enforced a whole lot anymore.
Or like the closed fist. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the style has changed and adapted, that it's like a more high flying style. Like I don't want to like force the guys to have to move so that they don't get counted out and then they're not safe. Like that would make me feel terrible. So, you know, it's at the end of the day, people have to tell their stories, but they also have to do it safely. So yeah, we do have an established rule book. It is not available publicly, but I have some cool projects coming up with that. So we'll see what happens.
So I'm going to ask you real quick under your head. This is a question that comes up in Zebra Talk regularly, and I'm sure you know what I'm getting at already, but triple threat match. Rope breaks or no rope breaks?
Correct, because it's a no DQ match.
There you go.
Yeah, it's traditionally no DQ, but
thank you, Jimmy Corderas, for answering that question at least 17 times since the inception of Super Talk.
Yes. It's kind of one of those, because I think like what fans expect is it's like, oh yeah, it's no DQ. But when you have a triple threat on a card, it's very rarely like in the later half. It's always going to be early. So you're never going to incorporate a bunch of weapons just because it's no DQ, because you don't want to undersell what your main event is or whatever. So I think people forget a lot of times that a triple threat is no DQ purely for that reason, just because of where it ends up falling on the card. Because a lot of that too is like, it's all the product. It's not just one match, but making sure your finishes aren't the same across different matches, making sure you're not repeating spots, all those things.
Making sure people are paying attention to what's going on later on the card.
Another way that refs can help and be beneficial.
Yes.
I've definitely found myself running around like 20 minutes before Dynamite.
Hey, they're doing a roll up. Hey, they're doing a roll.
That exact thing happened where I'm like, hey, they have a hot start in this and they're the first match and we're the second. We should probably talk about this real quick before they go out there. And just like little things like that, like just kind of keeping an eye not on just your stuff, but everyone else's stuff. Because ultimately, and I found like a broken record on this, but like it's about the product. It's not about one match over the other. Like all of the matches scaling to that crescendo of the main event make the whole show good. And ultimately, people need to watch the whole show for our ratings to be good. So we should do our best to help the earlier matches.
Absolutely. We talked about triple threats a little bit. Let's go ahead and dive in. What is your favorite match type? Do you have a type of match that you really enjoy reffing? And I'm, of course, also going to ask you, what kind of match do you hate reffing? Last man standings. Hate them. Hate them. You're just counting to almost 10 for like an hour.
I hate last man standings for that very reason, but I love them because it's one of those, like, it's a test to keeping your cadence. Sure, because that is one of those where like the audience always counts with you when you pin like 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Right.
But if you like start to slow down your 10 at all during that, the audience is going to notice.
Of course.
So it's one of those like, it's a good test base for like, all right, now is your cadence correct? All right, go do the last man standing match. And
Are you going to be consistent? Are you going to be consistent?
Are you? Let's throw this test at you. My favorite kind of matches to ref are technical matches. So singles match, technical match. Some of my favorite matches recently have been with Serena Deeb because she just has this amazing technical background.
Yeah.
Daniel Makabe was my favorite person to work with on the indies because of the same, like his technical background. He had a match with Jonathan Gresham, another technical guy.
Which just sounds like a dream match. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. And then Makabe had 3 matches with Thatcher that were all really, really good. So it's like, I refed a match between Makabe and Negro Navarro, which was really, really good.
Yeah. So, your whole career has just been like, you know, not necessarily spoiled because like obviously you've earned it, but like just, you know, because of your placement in the PNW and then, you know, immediate ascension, like you've had just like a dream of a career of match after match after match after match of just like bangers for years.
There's a lot of those where like I end up working with like some big name or whatever and someone's like, oh my God, that match is so dope. I'm like, oh,
you're like, who's Zack Sabre
like,
Jr.?
Who's that? Did I do that match? I can't remember. Like, it's kind of one of those like understanding the moments, right? Like understanding how cool something is in the moment. Like in the grand scheme of things, it may not be such a big deal later, but like at the time it was the coolest friggin' thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I really like technical matches. I feel like it's a bigger challenge to sell that story just because the modern fan with how their attention span works, like having a very mat-based grapply type match is hard to keep people engaged. So when you have a really good technical match, it's just mind-blowingly awesome. On top of that, from a physical standpoint, I think that's the best test for a referee.
Absolutely. I was totally going to say that.
It is all just reaction. It is all just up and down and left and right and moving and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, if your body positioning and your reactions and your cardio are all good, you're going to kill it in a technical match.
Yeah. I feel like other than like I feel like other than a banger like tag team match, like a technical one-on-one is going to test you as a referee more than anything else. It's going to be like, are you on it with your rules? Are you on it with your counts? Especially, you know, pin combinations, things like that. Like that's when they really lean into like what a referee brings to the table. Yeah.
Right. Matches I hate reffing. I do not like reffing death matches or anything with like a lot of.
Everybody brings up death matches in this question.
It's like I got into wrestling. I didn't get into MMA. Like I don't like real fighting. I don't like real violence. I don't like blood. Like because in my mind, I'm like, why would you want to hurt somebody? That's terrible. Okay, like
question though, because like I don't like reffing death matches, but I do enjoy watching death matches.
No, I hate watching them.
Not at all.
No.
Okay. So what are you gonna do if they ask you to do the exploding barbed wire death match?
I already know I'm not doing that one. So there you go.
You're like, Knox, you're really good at death matches. Go for it. Speaking of which,
I went up to Paul and I'm
insane.
Like,
that guy's insane. I did my first GCW show when they were doing death matches in LA. I had to do one of them, and I was watching him just to like kind of take some notes because I hadn't really like watched it from a I need to ref this perspective. Knox refs death matches without goggles and without gloves.
Yeah.
It's insane. He just goes in there
It's
and he has a little trick that I picked up from him. If there's like a chair or a piece of a door or wood or whatever, he'll slide it over to the shoulders and count on that. I'm just like, oh, but yeah, the glass is flying. He's just, I'm good. It's wild.
I once refed it ended up being a chair match, kind of one of those, like, you just let it kind of happen. It wasn't a no DQ match, but it was Joey Janela, and he just started throwing chairs into the ring. And I'm not going to stop it. Like the crowd wants to see that, right? You have the one guy in the front yelling at me, DQ him, ref. And I literally just say, like, you don't want me to stop this match. And like everyone else started laughing. But like there was a moment where there was like a whole pile of chairs and they pinned each other on the chairs. And I'm like, well, here we go. And I just hit the chairs really loud and I had this gigantic bruise, like just up my tricep. It was terrible looking.
When we would do a suburban fight and we had like a new referee come in for the first time, it was always funny to see like if they were going to go full on contact with the concrete, you'd kind of be like,
I actually have, I did a Falls Count Anywhere match for Project 42, this smaller promotion up in Seattle. And it was the first time I ever did a Falls Count Anywhere match. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we're going to go outside the ring and I just got to make sure it's really loud so everybody can hear it. And I didn't make the mental connection that the floor is concrete and I probably shouldn't do that. So there's a particular spot on my elbow that if I rest my arm weird, I get like this zinger at my arm.
Ooh, no.
Because I'm sure there's like a bone chip in there somewhere.
Yeah.
It happens like 100 times I rest my arm. It happens like one. But yeah, it's terrible. So like that one instance, I'm like, nope, that's it. That's about as extreme as I get. We're done.
Yep.
I appreciate the people that do them. I know there is like, it's an art form in and of itself.
Right.
Because
there's good ones and there's bad ones.
Yeah. There's good ones and there's bad ones. There's good ones where like they're building to a story and they're building to really big stuff. And there's bad ones where they're just literally bleeding after the first spot. And you're like, this isn't going anywhere. They're just literally trying to kill each other. Like you can't have light tubes be the first
It's just carnage for the sake of carnage. Yeah.
Right. It's like, that's the stuff I don't appreciate, but it's also like, I understand that everyone has a taste that they like. And that's just never been something for me. Like,
totally okay. Speaking of things that are for you, you had mentioned earlier that Cody versus Darby was your favorite match.
Yes.
Do you have a new favorite match?
I do. It's actually Chris Jericho versus MJF from this year's All Out. Yeah.
Totally understandable, but go ahead, tell me about it. What was your experience like?
I think a big part of it is I ref the majority of Chris Jericho's matches, and we have a very particular, like, he'll just say something and I get it. Like we're at that point of working together where I know what he means by things and I just interpret it and do it as he directs without him having to go into crazy detail. So a lot of that match ending was the Eddie Guerrero spot. But we did it in like the two where one of them cheated and then the other one cheated. And I caught the second one, but not the first one, kind of a thing. So a lot of that relies on trust. It relies on timing. And that's my new favorite, just because I think it shows less of a particular moment in time of like, this was a cool moment in my career, or this was a pivotal moment in my career, but it shows more of the growth to a moment, because I don't think I could have done that match as well as I did a year before, because I wasn't
needed to have those experiences with Chris. Yeah.
Right. I've had those experiences with him enough. He trusts me enough. I get how he works. I know what's important to him in a match. I know what isn't important to him in a match. So it's kind of it's a testament to our commitment to each other as performers, but also the work that I've put in to become the referee I want to be. So that's kind of why. And on top of that, it was just a really good match. Like,
yeah, of course.
it's the pacing of it is really good. The story, like where it's going after that, because now MJF's a part of the inner circle and blah, 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 like all those things. So it's like, if there's a good story before it, after it, it just makes it even better, right? Because then there's a reason for it. But yeah, it going really well, the planning going really well, and then the execution kind of following out of that. That's why it's up there.
You talk about how like you kind of have like unspoken bond with Jericho. It's good that you bring him up because famously, you know, like towards the beginning of AEW existing, Jericho had like, you know, a kind of like locker room meeting to talk about like how the refs were being interacted with. And I'm not
Mhm.
here to like, you know, dog on anybody and their experiences or anything. Actually, completely the other. How does it feel to have people like Jericho or like Dreamer, who has actually been mentioned before on the podcast, is somebody that like they had mentioned, you know, like Tommy. There was a ref that had a question at Impact, and Tommy just pulled him aside and called Jimmy Corderas up, like, you know, like let's figure out what the answer is.
Right.
How does it feel to have these, you know, like very seasoned veterans really like acknowledging how important it is to, you know, give you guys the respect and the consideration that, you know, is necessary for you to do your job?
I think it kind of comes back to a number of the things we talked about previously, like the ego side. It feels really good to have people like Jericho and Jim Ross and Dreamer and a lot of these guys who are veterans, like in your back pocket, like having
Sure.
your back. A lot of it too comes down to storytelling. Like the ref needs to remain protected so that there's what's the word I'm looking for? So that the match has meaning.
Sure. Yeah.
Because like if
It's for
if
like
the match doesn't have
legitimacy's
a
sake.
exactly. Like if you
Yeah.
don't have a ref, it's just two dudes rolling around in their underwear. There's no
Right.
actual contest. We're
Yeah.
the thing that provides legitimacy.
Right.
And I think it's a matter of that gets lost a lot. And I think with guys who maybe are earlier in their careers, they maybe just don't think about the grander scheme, or maybe they just don't even know like long term where a story is going in particular. And knowing all of these different ways in which you can tell a story and all these different things that you can touch on, it just may not be something that's at the forefront of people's minds. So it kind of comes back to a lot of things like it's nice having people kind of back you up. It's also just nice seeing people's interpretation of the product and understanding that there's not just two people in the ring, there's three people in the ring. And that's how you tell a story. Like the ref holding on to something until 4, whereas the baby face letting go at 2 when it's a 5 count, like those tell two completely different stories.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's why rules are important, because even just breaking off a 5 counter at a different number means something different depending on what your character is trying to portray.
You completely agree. Uh, you've had a lot, I'm a little flummoxed. You've
No,
had a
it's
lot of
fine.
influences from people in your experiences. You know, obviously, like you had a ref trainer in house. You've had a lot of like firsthand experiences with people at a very elevated level very quickly. How much do you think it affected your career that you had people who actually like, you know, paid attention to a referee or like had referee experience that could influence you and educate you? And have you taken the time to extend any of that onto people yourself? Have you trained referees? Are you planning on training more referees in the future? Talk about that a bit.
I am currently training, and I have trained referees. Back when everything was still open, I was training with local wrestling schools and just kind of overseeing ref training, putting them through drills, giving them feedback, all that kind of stuff. That's obviously kind of stopped. But since then, I've been filling that like training itch. There's a couple people I've been working with, like Allie down in the
Right.
Southern California, Arizona area. Like we have a tape study like every 2 weeks where I'll look at her matches and rip them apart. And if she doesn't have anything, we'll look at one of my matches and I'll rip it apart and say, this I sucked at. This was totally like accidental. This was a planned spot, like all these things. So that's kind of like the thing that I've been doing. And I think training is really helpful because it provides a like reason for doing things.
Right.
If you're doing a particular thing in a match, it's like, well, why are you doing it? Like,
Yeah.
what's the impetus for that particular spot? Like, there was a moment recently, we had a 6-man match on Dynamite, and Pac was breaking up a pin with a 450.
Mhm.
And it's one of those, I knew this was happening, but wanted to make sure he had just enough time to time that properly so that I'm not having to like wait on the 3 and totally like undersell the moment.
Right.
But it's finding ways like, okay, if I oversell this one spot a tiny bit more, then it doesn't look like I'm waiting to go for a pin.
It'll give me
And
an
then it
extra
helps.
half a second to get to the pin so that when he goes to break up the pin, yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly. It's little things like that and understanding why you're doing the things you're doing. And if you can explain it to someone else, it, I think, makes you inadvertently a lot better at your job, because then you understand the method behind the madness type thing. I was really fortunate to have a ref trainer. purely because like there's a lot you can get out of learning how to ref from a wrestler, but they're going to look at the role differently. They're going to look at as this is the thing this person is providing to me rather than this is the person who I am. So I was fortunate to have two trainers, one who was a wrestler and one who was a referee. And they were both specifically that. Like Chris had never wrestled. He was only ever a ref. And Steve had maybe like refed a couple of backyard shows, but he was primarily a wrestler. So having those two guys kind of have their opinions of how to do something, because Chris would have like, oh, this is how I would do this spot. And then Steve would say, well, as a wrestler, I wouldn't necessarily want to do it that way. Here's why I would do it. And having just kind of that dialogue between the three of us of understanding what anything was from any position, not just from like a referee's perspective, but also the wrestler's perspective, also the fan perspective, like how things can all kind of play into each other and how things can be interpreted depending on what your role is in the product. I think it's really, really important. I think a lot of times, a lot of refs fall into it accidentally. Like they know somebody, there's no refs at a show. Somebody throws them a shirt and says, go stand in the back and stay out of the way. Yep. And some people get really lucky and end up finding a lot of really good opportunities for growth and finding the right mentors and stuff. But I honestly feel bad for a lot of people that fall into that spot because it's like, you're not having that support that I think you need to potentially be successful. Sure. And if it's not just the work you put in, it's the work that people are willing to help you with. Like there's only so much you can do for yourself. Ultimately, there's going to have to be someone to bring you along for the ride. Like one of the things I tell everybody a lot is, I'll give you feedback if you ask for it, but if you don't apply it, I'll stop because I know it's not worth my time. Or like when I tape study with people, I'm like, okay, well, here's the two things I need you to improve in. And if you
can't improve on them,
I'm not going to sit here and watch tape with you for an hour because you clearly didn't do the thing that I told you to do. And it's like, if that's feedback that you don't agree with, one, why are you asking me in the first place? Sure. And two, this is clearly then a waste of both of our time. And it's not like that's a mean thing. You have to figure out who you want to be and you have to find the feedback that you need that's going to make you better, not just the feedback you want to hear.
Yeah, not to mention, it's like what we were saying earlier, like you're not going to get any better just by having somebody pat you on the head and say, oh, you did a good job.
Right. You have to eat your vegetables. Like we all want to eat cake all the time. Cake's great. I'm particularly an ice cream person. Even as a vegan, I don't like eating vegetables, but I do have to eat them often because I know they're good for me.
Absolutely. And, to add to your point, like it is incredibly influential to have somebody there that, like you're saying, is there to help you along. Somebody has to take your hand eventually, no matter how good you get or how much experience you have on your own with, just kind of winging it through, you're going to need someone to help you eventually. I give a lot of credit to Nick Bonanno affecting my career as well
Nick's
as Jeremy Marcus's career. Like we
Jeremy's
were
great.
Doing okay, we're kind of like neck and neck with each other. We started within a few months of each other and like we were going to be fine, but like then we never would have gotten to the level that we've gotten to, as limited as it is so far, without Nick's experience coming to Los Angeles and affecting us. And then obviously our experience affecting the people that are around us. Like you've been a member of Zebra Talk for years now. Like speaking of which, like how do you think that the group has affected your career personally? That's something that I don't really ask a lot about on the podcast, but I'm kind of curious.
I think a big part of it is I entered this business very naive, not realizing the politics of it. Sure. And there are politics in every locker room. It's just how prevalent are they? But I think a lot of it comes down to I'm just very much a very happy-go-lucky person and I want to help everybody, but also kind of like knowing your place in everything. Like if I'm someone who's 6 months in, maybe I shouldn't be providing advice on the advice thread. But as the post I make probably every 3 months, if you're a woman referee looking for pants, that's a great place to ask. I know exactly where to buy pants if you're a female referee because there's literally one spot that has the best pants.
I really loved that, like you brought that to the table, not like the only thing that you can bring to the table is the pants answer, obviously, but like, I felt like in particular,
it's a good answer.
Smitties. I felt like when we were doing the Q&As in particular, like you and, the other like femme identifying members of the Q&A series, like kind of shined a light onto some of the questions that like the male identifying referees would not have really ever considered, like how do you find pants that are tailored appropriately? How do you have pants that have pockets, like things like that. So like
belt loops, go
yeah.
figure.
uh,
Functional.
you may be youthful in your experience, as am I, but like you bring experiences to the table that other people don't bring to the table, in addition to the fact that like there may be a lot of people in there who are more experienced than you and I, but if they're not answering the questions, then the questions are just being left unanswered,
Mm-hmm. So I think what Zebra Talk has provided to me, like early on, it was a very good tool to see how people like interacted with each other in the business and to learn the names behind the faces. So if I was watching a match in the Chicago area, like I could figure out who that was.
Who's Sam Meadowood? Oh, that's who Sam Meadowood.
Oh, that's who it is. Who's Nate Speckman? Oh, that's who that is. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing those names so that I can build those connections so that I could eventually, like, if I end up working out there, I know names and faces. But the other thing too, I think you touched on this a lot, and this is something that's really important to me. So I'm one of those like hardcore feminists that I'll get on my soapbox every now and then and talk about like women's equality and all that. But I know that with a lot of yelling, that turns off a lot of ears. Yeah. So I try and find the ways that I can promote equality where I can, where it doesn't feel like you're getting a lesson in feminism. So something like the pants thing is probably the best example, where every time I see the dudes talk about pants, they go to Walmart, they spend $10 on Dickies and it's fine. Great. That's awesome for you. But for me, it's actually a struggle. And I end up spending, $50 on a pair of pants that I have to then spend $100 on to get tailored, but they're really, really high quality pants, but also just putting it out there. Like this is a struggle and people will see that and recognize it and understand that this is still very much a role that's meant for men that people don't really think about. I get all of my shirts tailored at AEW. The smalls, they're all men's shirts, but the smalls are like trash bags on me.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I'm sure they look like a sheet on you.
Yeah, I had a picture on my Instagram a while back that was like, here's the before and then here's the after. And it's massive. The sleeves are super long. They're baggy. It hangs off my shoulders. Like it's just all kinds of bad. But it's understanding that like, if you want the job, you have to dress for the job. So if I want to be a referee who is respected and shows authority, I need to have confidence in how I dress type of thing. But it's also showing like the work involved. People don't see the work I'm putting in behind the scenes. But if I do something like, oh, I'm spending the time to find these pants, I'm spending the time to earn the money to pay to get these pants tailored. It's the little things that all add up over time. Or even identifying like, oh, here's all this makeup that I wear. Like, no, you don't have to wear makeup if you're a female ref, but you do have to care about your appearance. Like comb your friggin' hair. Like you're very good about the way that you present your hair. You look very excellent today, by the way. Yeah. Yeah. This is I'm on a podcast and only covered in my eyebrows look. This isn't my full face.
Not my full war paint.
I straightened my hair today. Yes, looks good. But yeah, it's understanding like the different things that women have to go through for something that's a very male dominated thing. And on top of that, it's understanding that like, I have a very boisterous personality. I'm very out there and I talk. And if people talk crap about me on the internet and I'm just kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. I have a thick skin, but not everyone is like that. And not everyone has that background. So having people that can talk about the problems or better way to phrase it is the struggles or the barriers that are unique to people who aren't male identifying in this role. I think it kind of makes it a little bit easier and it makes people feel more comfortable to ask questions. And if people can ask questions, then they can get the most out of the group that they need.
I think it's also important to like kind of recognize the fact that like, yes, there are very gender specific issues or struggles that people go through in the referee role, but there's also a lot of struggles that like maybe the female identifying referees go through that they think they're only going through because of a gender thing. And then they'll realize that like, all of referees are harassed and abused.
Yes.
Whereas,
it's
no money. So much more to their extent. Obviously, it goes to an nth degree because of their gender identification, but like it is something that like maybe they can feel a little bit more, welcomed into the community because like it is something that like all of us go through. We're all neglected and underpaid and overworked, all that stuff.
But, I feel like a lot of us, like Zebra Talk is sitting in a circle and someone stands up and goes, "Hi, I'm Aubrey, and I was underpaid on the indies," and everyone says, "Hi, Aubrey." It's like, yes, I took bookings for $0 and I flew myself places because I needed to get my name out there. The things that people tell you not to do,
to Japan. I apologize.
Yes, like there was literally one time on the indies, somebody paid for my flight Every other time I paid for my flights. And I think
same actually, one time.
That was my goal before I got signed. It was like, I want one indie promoter to pay for my flight. Just so I could say that they did it.
Women of Wrestling paid for me to fly to Los Angeles because I was the head of a ring crew, not because I was reffing. So I'm still trying to cross that off my list.
I would count it. I don't know. That counts. That's one of those gray area things. It works.
I got a flight.
You get a flight in wrestling. It's fine. I flew to a booking. It doesn't matter what you were booked for. Someone else paid for that flight. There was an email exchange of, here's my birth date so you can book my ticket.
And, you know, after 10-hour bus rides to and from Los Angeles for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, having an hour-and-a-half flight from San Francisco to Los Angeles, I got off of the plane and was just like,
yeah,
thank you, God.
I have a whole day.
We're kind of getting to our time. We're going to wind things down a little bit. I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but at the
glad you're cutting it off, because you know I could talk for like 13 hours. So
same. At the end of each episode, I like to give everybody the opportunity to, obviously, I want people to be able to reach you and get in contact with you. But in addition to that, I like to do something a little special. If there are any promotions that you think that maybe people haven't gotten eyes on yet, or more specifically, if you think there are any wrestlers that you think deserve an extra little look, extra little, glance in their particular direction, please shine some light onto them.
I think from a wrestler perspective, and I had mentioned his name earlier in this, but Daniel Makabe. He had.
You want to spell that for people real quick, just so they can like.
Makabe.
Yes.
Yeah, he's on Twitter. I think just Daniel Makabe. He's definitely my favorite person that I worked with on the indies, and I could feel every match I got better at reffing. Sure. And I understood wrestling psychology more and more. And I think it's just one of those, he just needs that opportunity to be noticed. And it was really unfortunate with the timing and everything, because I think he had something like 5 or 6 bookings. He had a match booked against Nick Gage at GCW before COVID hit. And it was just like, oh my God, like this, he was almost there.
Right there. One of the biggest indicators of that was actually one of the people that I talked to over at that other really popular company that, was on TV. They had actually asked me once, they're like, what's the deal with this Daniel Makabe guy? And I'm like, yes. If you're asking me, then he's almost there. But anyway, go ahead, continue.
Yes. Yeah, so he's easily my favorite person, and I know for a fact that like he's helped me a lot. So I'd really love for him to find success in this business. However he deems success to be. I know that he sells a ton of merch. So yeah, definitely go check him out, buy his t-shirts. He also posts like a new indie music song to listen to every day. So if you're super into music, he's a great guy to follow. For promotions, I'm gonna put over Without a Cause, which runs up in Everett in Washington. I like, full disclosure, early on, I was part of the booking team, so I am slightly biased in this. But I like what they're doing because they do a good mix of fly-in talent and local talent, which I personally appreciate, because as someone who was local talent, working with fly-in talent, working with people who are better than you makes you better. Yes, so they're doing a great job investing back into the community and building stars that will eventually go out and continue to build Seattle wrestling for what it can.
I was going to say, not to mention stimulating the area that they're in itself. It's one thing to like make people success and then they go off into the world, but it's another to create a wrestling community.
Right. Any promotion that's willing to put a title on Chris Bay knows what they're doing. That's all I'm going to say. Chris Bay is amazing. And I'm glad that like he got involved. Like they've had Hammerstone, they've had TGP, they've had a lot of really great guys come through. Kimberly, they've had so
Keita
many.
Murray is one of their champions now. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. Like they have so many good people come through, and it's a good description of indie wrestling, because you have this locker room with, people who are early on in their careers, and then people who are wrestling on the indies as a living, and you see all of them kind of come together and make magic, and it's really awesome. And it's a very positive environment. It's a very kid-friendly show. There's always a bunch of kids, but the kids like yell horrible things. Like the kids are worse than the parents. Like they're just like, you suck, get off the stage. And I'm just like, what is up with this child? Like
they're just letting it out. It's that place where they get to let it all on the floor.
Right. So yeah, I think that's probably the place I want to put over most. They've only been around, I think, like 2 years or so.
Yeah.
But I really like what they're doing as far as building up the Seattle wrestling scene. and the Pacific Northwest wrestling scene, and doing it the right way. They're giving opportunities to the guys that are going to be the stars of the future.
I would also really like to add on top of, the show that they have themselves, the school that they're running right now is like just so amazing. The wealth of information that they offer to people, like doing things the right way, the safe way. Like Dave and Chris are absolutely phenomenal trainers.
I think the school is Dragonplex.
Yes.
Is that the name of it? Yeah, I just want to make sure we say that. But yeah, Dave Turner was one of the guys that I drove with a lot very early on in my career. He was basically my road buddy. And I learned a lot about the wrestling business from Dave. So he really helped bring me up a lot. And I'm really glad that he's open to school because he's a very good teacher and he has a lot of knowledge to share. So he's a great guy, and like he just loves this business, and I like working with people who have a very clear love for something and they're not bitter about it. Yeah. Like, I don't want that negativity. I have to be on Twitter. There's enough negativity there. Like bring the positive. Like, what is good about wrestling? Great. And I still talk to Dave regularly. I'll mention things like, hey, I see the student that you're training. Like, let me see. Let's talk about them, blah, blah, blah.
How do we spell his name again?
DAVE. TURNER.
Just to totally like agree with what you're saying. Like my girlfriend for a little while before we closed down again was going up to Dragonplex to train with Dave, and like I've been around a lot of trainers at this point, and a lot of really good trainers. Like Peter Avalon, incredible trainer.
Peter Avalon is easily the most underrated guy at AEW.
100%. He's one of the most underrated people in all of professional wrestling.
In all of wrestling.
Yeah,
like he's
absolutely.
So good.
And such an amazing human.
So nice, so caring. He knows exactly what his role is in this. Like he's the best. He's the absolute best.
Dave is one of my favorite trainers, in addition to Peter, who also is, but like one of my favorite trainers that I've ever been around. Seeing him explain things to people with like the patience and just the vocabulary necessary and like the understanding to really like get things through to people is pretty amazing. But anyway, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. If you guys would like to, we didn't get your socials in real quick. I'm sure they know where to find you, but let's talk about your projects. Let's talk about your social media, anything you want people to see.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram, Ref Aubrey. You can find me there. I'm also host of the AEW Unrestricted podcast with Tony Schiavone. We have new episodes on all of your favorite platforms Thursday mornings, and on YouTube on Monday mornings-ish, whenever they get uploaded. I'm also involved with AEW Games, which we're releasing a game soon, and my game, Elite General Manager, will be coming out eventually, and it's super fun. We're working on a cool console game that everyone's excited about. You can follow AEW Games on Twitter, and then on Instagram at Play AEW Games. So lots of cool projects and cool things to work on. Cool ways to follow.
I hear there's this like TV show that you're on Wednesdays that people can check you out on.
Tune in on TNT every Wednesday, 8 o'clock, 7 Central for AEW Dynamite. Thanks, buddy. AEW Dark on Tuesdays on YouTube.
Speaking of Dark, I'm so excited for Levi Shapiro tonight.
I got to ref his match, the 8-man. It was real good.
It'd be amazing. All right, cool. Let's wind this down. Thank you so much again for being on here today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. You're crazy busy, so it was amazing that we got to get this done. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, for watching, however it is that you're enjoying this podcast. If you would like to support Zebra Talk, you can go to prowrestlingtees.com/Zebra Talk. We have lots of t-shirts, sweaters, hats, COVID masks. We're selling tracksuits. We got all kinds of cool merch. You can put zebras all over yourself. If you would like to be on the podcast, if you're a referee yourself, please send an email to zebratalk123@gmail.com. That is also where you can apply for the Zebra Talk Fund, which if you are unfamiliar with the Zebra Talk Fund, it is a Zebra Talk is a nonprofit charity that we actually donate money to people to travel on the indies because refs don't get paid to travel. So
refs don't get paid to travel.
If you'd like to find us on social media, Zebra Talk 123 on Instagram and Twitter. If you're a referee and you're not in the actual Zebra Talk group on Facebook, please join. Find me. I'm Robert Odie Brown on Facebook. I'm Odie1 Canody on Instagram and Twitter. Find me, talk to me, add me. We'll get you in Zebra Talk and get you going.
And then you can hang out with cool people like us and our friends and all of this wealth of knowledge.
Community. We can
hug and fill our hearts with joy. It's great.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, can't wait to see you again. Bye, folks.
I love you.